The metallic click of a training pistol echoed through the firing range at Naval Base Coronado. Cadet Blake Anderson pressed the barrel against the back of a small woman's head, his voice dripping with contempt. "You lost, sweetheart? The kitchen's that way." His buddies erupted in laughter, their voices bouncing off the concrete walls where 15 other cadets watched, some uneasy, most entertained. The woman, barely 5'4", wearing a plain gray maintenance uniform, didn't flinch. She continued wiping down the tactical briefing table, as if a weapon wasn't aimed at her skull. Her hands moved with mechanical precision, folding the cloth in perfect military corners. "I said," Blake jabbed the pistol harder, "are you deaf and stupid?" She turned slowly. Her face was unremarkable, pale skin, light brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup. But her eyes. For just a split second, those hazel eyes locked onto Blake's with an intensity that made his finger twitch on the trigger guard. Then she looked down, submissive, small, exactly what they expected. "My apologies, sir." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Blake holstered his weapon with a satisfied smirk. "That's what I thought. Now get lost before I report you for contaminating a restricted area." She gathered her cleaning supplies and walked toward the exit, head down, shoulders hunched. The cadets had already forgotten her, returning to their weapon drills and bragging about their upcoming graduation. None of them noticed the slight hitch in her step when Blake had pressed the gun to her head. Not fear, but muscle memory. A counter-disarm calculated and dismissed in milliseconds. None of them saw the faded serial number tattooed inside her wrist as she gripped the mop handle. None of them realized that in the next 20 minutes, everything they thought they knew about weakness and strength was about to shatter completely. The woman's footsteps echoed down the corridor door as she pushed her cleaning cart toward the tactical briefing room. The wheels squeaked rhythmically, a sound that had become background noise to the cadets who rushed past her without a second glance. She kept her head down, her movements deliberate and unhurried, just another piece of the infrastructure that kept the base running. Inside the briefing room, she set down her supplies with practiced efficiency. The space was empty now, but it wouldn't be for long. Morning briefing started at 0600 hours, and it was currently 0530. 30 minutes to clean, organize, and disappear before the officers arrived. She pulled out a gray cloth and began wiping down the long conference table. Her hands moved in precise patterns, left to right, overlapping strokes, no wasted motion. But as she worked, her eyes constantly scanned the room. Exit points, sight lines, blind spots. The kind of assessment that had nothing to do with janitorial work and everything to do with survival. When she reached for a fresh cloth from her cart, she folded the used one with swift, exact movements. The fabric formed a perfect rectangle, edges aligned, corners sharp. Military hospital corners, the kind that took weeks of training to master and years to become automatic. She didn't notice Captain Ethan Foster watching from the doorway. Foster leaned against the frame, arms crossed, his weathered face thoughtful. He'd been at Coronado for 22 years, trained 3 generations of SEALs, and seen enough to recognize when something didn't add up. The way this woman moved, there was something deliberate about it, controlled, like she was always ready for something. He said nothing, just filed the observation away and moved on. The woman continued her work, spraying cleaner on the presentation screen, wiping it down in smooth vertical strokes. She was halfway through when the door burst open with enough force to slam against the wall. "Well, well, well." Bellatrix Carla strutted into the room, her blonde hair pulled back in a regulation bun that somehow still managed to look styled. She was the only female cadet in the current SEAL training class, and she wore that distinction like armor. "Look who decided to contaminate our space again." The woman didn't pause in her cleaning. Spray, wipe, spray, wipe. Bellatrix circled her like a predator assessing prey. "You know what really bothers me? Women like you, weak, submissive, making the rest of us look bad." She stepped closer, invading the woman's personal space. "You're exactly why they don't think we belong in combat roles. One look at you, and they think that's all we're capable of." The woman stepped back, giving ground, her eyes still downcast. "That's right. Run away." Bellatrix's voice dripped with disdain. "That's all you know how to do, isn't it?" The woman gathered her supplies and moved to a different part of the room, positioning herself near the far wall. From anyone else's perspective, it looked like retreat, but she'd just placed herself at the optimal position to observe both entrance points and maintain maximum distance from the threat. Bellatrix didn't notice. She was too busy preening in front of the window, adjusting her uniform, satisfied she'd established dominance. The woman went back to work, this time wiping down the tactical display monitors. Her movements remained steady, methodical, but her posture had shifted imperceptibly, weight balanced on the balls of her feet, shoulders loose, ready to move in any direction. Years of training didn't just disappear, they buried themselves in muscle memory, waiting. 15 minutes later, the room began to fill. Cadets filtered in, talking loudly, jostling each other with the aggressive camaraderie of young men trying to prove themselves. Blake Anderson led the pack, his broad shoulders and confident swagger commanding attention. "Move it, people," he barked, and the others obeyed automatically. "Weapons brief in 10 minutes. I want everyone sharp." The woman was packing up her cart when Blake noticed her, his face twisted with disgust. "Are you kidding me? She's still here?" "I'm finished, sir," she said quietly, not meeting his eyes. "I'll leave now." "You'll leave when I tell you to leave." Blake stepped into her path. "Actually, since you're here, make yourself useful. Coffee, black, and make it good. I'm maintenance staff, not... I don't care what you are." Blake's voice dropped to a dangerous level. "You're in my briefing room. That makes you my problem. Now, either get me coffee or get security to escort you out. Your choice." The woman's jaw tightened, just for a second, before she nodded to move toward the small kitchenette in the corner. As she prepared the coffee, more cadets arrived. Among them was Jasper Flynn, carrying a disassembled M4 carbine in a tactical case. He was smaller than Blake, lean and wiry, with the intense focus of someone who'd memorized every weapons manual the Navy had ever published. "Check this out," Jasper announced, setting the case on the table. "Got authorized to bring the new upper receiver for comparison. The gas system is completely redesigned." Cadets crowded around, eager to examine the weapon. Jasper began pulling out components, explaining the modifications with the enthusiasm of a true gun enthusiast. He held up a small spring, gesturing wildly, and it slipped from his fingers. The spring arced through the air, spinning end over end. It was going to hit the ground, bounce under the table, take 5 minutes to find. Except it didn't hit the ground. The woman's hand shot out with reflexive precision, catching the spring in midair without looking. Her body had reacted before her brain could stop it, the way a goalkeeper catches a ball, pure muscle memory from thousands of hours of weapons training. She held the spring for a heartbeat, then carefully placed it on the table near Jasper. The room had gone quiet. Jasper stared at her, then at his own hands, then back at her. "That was... how did you..." "Lucky catch," Blake interrupted loudly. "Even a broken clock is right twice a day. Thanks for the save, sweetheart. Now, where's that coffee?" The spell broke. Cadets laughed, the tension dissolved, and they went back to examining the weapon. But Jasper kept glancing at the woman, his expression puzzled. That catch wasn't luck. The reflexes, the hand-eye coordination, that took training. The woman finished preparing Blake's coffee and set it on the table. Her hands were steady, but internally she was berating herself. Stupid, careless. She'd let reflex override caution, and now someone was paying attention. She needed to leave. Now. "Excuse me, sirs," she murmured, reaching for her cart. "Hold up." Cadet Connor Royd appeared in the doorway, blocking her exit. He was quieter than Blake, less overtly aggressive, but his eyes held a calculating coldness that was somehow worse. "You forgot to restock the supply closet yesterday." "I restocked it at 1800 hours," she replied evenly. "Really? Because I checked this morning and half the cleaning supplies were missing. You trying to steal from the Navy?" Connor's voice was casual, almost friendly, which made the accusation more cutting. "I haven't taken anything." "Then where's the supplies?" She didn't answer, because she knew what Connor had done. Knew he'd hidden the supplies himself, creating a problem to pin on her. It was textbook harassment, subtle, deniable, designed to make her look incompetent. Before we continue with what happens next, if you're enjoying this story of hidden strength and shocking revelations, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit that notification bell. We post new military stories like this 3 times a week, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming. The next part will blow your mind. Now, let's get back to the range where Hazel's world is about to change forever. The woman, whose name was Hazel Morrison, though no one here knew that, met Connor's eyes for just a moment, long enough to let him know she understood exactly what game he was playing. Then she looked away, submissive again. "I'll restock everything immediately," she said. "See that you do." Connor stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy. Wouldn't want there to be an official complaint about your work performance. Hazel pushed her cart past him, feeling 15 pairs of eyes on her back. She could hear their whispered comments, their dismissive laughter. Let them underestimate her. It was safer that way. She made it 3 steps down the corridor before Connor's voice called out, "Oh, and sweetie, try not to steal anything else on your way." More laughter. Hazel kept walking, her face blank, her shoulders hunched, the perfect picture of someone beaten down by life and too weak to fight back. It was a performance she'd perfected over 15 years of covert operations. Lieutenant Bradley Archer arrived at the briefing room at precisely 0600 hours, his uniform crisp, his bearing military perfect. At 42, he'd been training SEAL candidates for 6 years, and he took pride in his ability to separate the warriors from the pretenders. "Attention!" he barked, and the room snapped to order. Cadets stood behind their chairs, backs straight, eyes forward. Archer surveyed them with the critical eye of a man who'd seen too many promising candidates wash out. "At ease, take your seats." He moved to the front of the room, pulling up a tactical map on the display screen. "Today we're covering close-quarter battle scenarios, urban environments, limited visibility, high civilian presence." He clicked through slides, explaining engagement protocols, rules of force escalation, strategic positioning. The cadets took notes, asked questions, demonstrated the kind of tactical thinking that separated special operations from regular infantry. Hazel had positioned herself in the back corner of the room, ostensibly to restock supplies. But from her vantage point, she could see and hear everything. She listened to Archer's briefing with the attention of someone who had lived through these scenarios dozens of times. "Cadet Anderson," Archer called out, "your team leader. Enemy fighters have barricaded themselves in a 3-story residential building. 30 hostages confirmed. What's your approach?" Blake stood, confident as ever. "Sir, I'd position snipers on adjacent buildings, establish a perimeter, then breach simultaneously from ground level and roof access. Overwhelming force, minimize enemy reaction time. Time estimate, planning and positioning, 2 hours. Breach to hostage extraction, under 10 minutes. Archer nodded. "Solid plan. Anyone see a problem with it?" Silence. The cadets looked at each other, but no one challenged Blake's assessment. "Cadet Flynn?" Jasper stood. "No, sir. The approach is tactically sound." "It is," Archer agreed. "It's also exactly what the enemy would expect from a conventional team." He changed the slide, showing casualty statistics from similar operations. Textbook approaches get people killed because the enemy has read the same textbooks. In real combat, you need to think 3 steps ahead, anticipate their countermeasures, and adapt. In the back corner, Hazel's lips twitched. She remembered Fallujah, October 2009, a hostage situation almost identical to this scenario. Her team had tried the conventional breach. It had cost them 3 operators and 12 hostages before she'd made the call to abort and try something different. She caught herself mentally running through the alternative approach, the one that had worked, the one that had saved the remaining hostages and earned her a Bronze Star. It was instinct, analyzing tactical problems, finding solutions. The kind of thinking that never turned off, even when you were pretending to be someone else. "Sir, permission to speak?" Cadet Liam Bradley, Blake's closest friend and yes man, raised his hand. "Go ahead, Bradley." "Isn't overwhelming force standard doctrine? I thought the goal was to end situations fast. Fast isn't always best. Fast often means loud. And loud means casualties." Archer's expression darkened with old memories. "I've seen more operators die from rushing than from taking their time. Speed is worthless if everyone's dead at the end." The briefing continued for another 30 minutes, covering equipment checks, communication protocols, and contingency planning. Hazel continued her work, appearing to pay no attention while absorbing every word. When Archer finally dismissed the class, the cadets filed out in clusters, still debating tactics. Hazel was wiping down the coffee station when she felt someone watching her. Lieutenant Archer stood near the door, his arms crossed, his expression thoughtful. "You've been in here a while." "Finishing up, sir," Hazel replied without looking at him. "I'll be out of your way shortly." "That briefing didn't bore you?" The question caught her off guard. She glanced up, meeting his eyes for just a second before looking away again. "I'm just here to clean, sir." "Right." Archer's tone suggested he didn't quite believe her. "Well, make sure you lock up when you're done." He left, but Hazel felt the weight of his suspicion. another person paying attention, another variable to manage. This assignment was supposed to be simple. Observe the candidates, assess their character, file a report. But complications kept multiplying. She finished cleaning quickly and wheeled her cart out into the corridor. The morning sun was bright through the windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Coronado was beautiful this time of day, peaceful in the brief window between dawn training and the chaos of the regular schedule. Hazel pushed her cart toward the supply closet, already planning how to handle Connor's sabotage. She'd restock everything, document it with timestamps, make sure there was no question about her competence. It was tedious, but necessary. The mission parameters were clear: maintain cover, complete the assessment, extract without compromising her identity. 15 years ago, when she'd first joined the SEALs, she had imagined a career of direct action missions, kicking down doors, eliminating threats, saving lives. The kind of work that made headlines and earned medals. Instead, she'd spent most of her career in the shadows. Ghost Unit didn't do publicity. They did the operations that officially never happened, in countries the United States officially wasn't operating in, against enemies that officially didn't exist. It was necessary work, important work. But some days, like today, she found herself wondering what it would be like to be recognized for what she actually was instead of constantly pretending to be something less. She reached the supply closet and pulled out her keys. The lock was already open. Someone had been here. Hazel opened the door slowly, ready for anything. Inside, the closet was a disaster. Supplies scattered everywhere, bottles opened and spilled, everything mixed together in deliberate chaos. It would take hours to clean and restock properly. Connor's handiwork. Thorough and vindictive. Hazel stood in the doorway, surveying the damage with practiced calm. This was the kind of petty harassment she'd faced throughout her career. From instructors who thought women didn't belong in combat roles, from teammates who resented her presence, from enemies who underestimated her, right up until the moment she proved them fatally wrong. She'd learned to endure it, to compartmentalize the anger and frustration, to stay focused on the mission. But standing here, looking at this calculated attempt to sabotage her work and humiliate her, Hazel felt something shift inside her chest. A familiar cold rage, the kind that had gotten her through Kandahar, through Mosul, through all the operations where the only thing between her and death was the ability to stay calm and think clearly. She took a slow breath, centered herself, and began cleaning up the mess. 2 hours later, the supply closet was pristine again. Hazel had documented everything with photos on her secure phone, timestamps, and all. Evidence, if it came to that. She doubted it would. Connor was too careful to leave obvious traces, but preparation was second nature. She was locking the closet when Petty Officer Mia Kezia rounded the corner, carrying a stack of paperwork. Mia was newer to the base, transferred in 3 months ago from a desk job in San Diego. She had the perpetually overwhelmed look of someone drowning in bureaucracy. "Oh, good. You're still here," Mia said, relief evident in her voice. "I need to ask you something." Hazel waited, silent and patient. "The Admiral's office needs a deep clean before the inspection next week. I know it's not your usual rotation, but everyone else is swamped and—" Mia trailed off, looking embarrassed. "I hate asking you to take on extra work." "It's fine," Hazel said simply. "When? Thursday afternoon? After 1,500 hours?" "I'll be there." Mia smiled gratefully. "Thank you. Really, you're a lifesaver." She started to leave, then paused. "Hey, can I ask you something?" Hazel tensed imperceptibly. "Sure. Does it bother you, the way they treat you?" Mia's voice was quiet, almost conspiratorial. "The cadets, I mean. I've seen how they talk to you. It's not okay." For a moment, Hazel considered answering honestly, explaining that she'd faced down insurgents in Syria, neutralized bomb makers in Yemen, extracted hostages from situations that should have been suicide missions, that a few arrogant cadets barely registered on her threat assessment scale. Instead, she shrugged. "It's just part of the job." "Well, it shouldn't be." Mia's expression was fierce. "You work hard. You deserve respect." Hazel felt an unexpected warmth at those words. Real kindness, offered without agenda. It was rare in her world. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. After Mia left, Hazel continued her rounds, methodically working through her assigned areas. The base was a small city unto itself. barracks, training facilities, administrative buildings, all connected by a network of corridors and courtyards. She had memorized the layout within her first week, cataloged every entry point, identified every potential choke point and escape route. Old habits, ghost unit habits. She was mopping the corridor outside the weapons training facility when she heard raised voices. Through the open door, she could see Blake, Jasper, and several other cadets gathered around a table covered in disassembled firearms. "I'm telling you, the gas tube is the weak point," Jasper was saying, his voice animated. "If you're in desert conditions, sand gets into the system and causes malfunctions. That's why the piston system is superior." "Theory versus practice, Flynn." Blake's tone was condescending. "In real combat, reliability matters more than theoretical superiority. The M4 platform has been proven in every theater of operation for the past 2 decades. Except when it jams," Jasper countered. "Ask any operator who's been in sustained firefights. Jamming is a persistent issue." Blake laughed. "Operators? You're not an operator, Flynn. You're a cadet who has read too many Wikipedia articles." The other cadets snickered. Jasper's face flushed red, but he pressed on. "I've studied every after-action report from the past 10 years. The data clearly shows..." "Data." Blake picked up one of the weapon components, hefting it thoughtfully. "You want to impress me? Don't quote data. Show me you can field strip and reassemble an M4 in under 60 seconds in the dark. Show me you can clear a malfunction while taking fire. That's what matters." "Fine." Jasper's voice was tight. "Time me." Blake glanced at his watch. "Go." Jasper's hands moved quickly, disassembling the weapon with practiced efficiency. But he was nervous, fumbling slightly, losing precious seconds. The other cadets watched in silence, some sympathetic, most just entertained by the drama. Hazel watched too, from her position in the corridor. She could see exactly where Jasper was losing time, hesitating on the bolt carrier group, overcomplicated his grip on the charging handle. Simple fixes, but ones that only came with real experience. Jasper finished with a triumphant "done" and looked at Blake expectantly. Blake checked his watch. 87 seconds. "Congrats, Flynn. You're only 27 seconds too slow to be useful in combat." The room erupted in laughter. Jasper's shoulders slumped, his moment of confidence crushed. "But hey," Blake continued, clapping Jasper on the shoulder hard enough to make him stumble. "At least you're fast with Wikipedia. Maybe they'll make you a tactical librarian." More laughter. Jasper gathered the weapon components with shaking hands, his humiliation complete. Hazel turned back to her mopping, her jaw tight. She knew exactly how that scenario played out because she'd lived it. Not the humiliation. She'd been the one doing the impossible. 42 seconds in pitch darkness, with adrenaline making her hands shake and gunfire echoing off compound walls. She'd done it because the alternative was dying, and she'd had 3 wounded teammates depending on her. But Blake didn't need to know that. Nobody here did. She finished mopping and moved on to the next section of corridor. The morning was bleeding into afternoon, the base getting busier. Personnel moved past her without acknowledgement, just another piece of background scenery. At 12:30 hours, Hazel took her lunch break in the staff cafeteria. She sat alone at a corner table, eating a sandwich and watching the room with the detached observation that had become second nature. Hierarchies played out in seating arrangements. Social dynamics revealed in conversation clusters. Information passed through body language as much as words. A group of instructors sat at the center table, discussing the upcoming qualification exercises. Hazel listened without appearing to, cataloging useful intelligence. Phase 3, water exercises scheduled for next week. Increased emphasis on navigation and survival skills. 3 cadets already identified as likely to wash out. At a table near the windows, Bellatrix held court with several male cadets. She was animated, laughing, playing the role of one of the guys, while simultaneously reminding everyone she was different, special. The only woman tough enough to survive SEAL training. Hazel had met dozens of women like Bellatrix over her career. Women who had internalized the idea that femininity was weakness, who distanced themselves from other women to prove they belonged in male-dominated spaces. It was a survival strategy, and Hazel didn't judge it, but it was also exhausting to watch. "Mind if I join you?" Hazel looked up to find Captain Foster standing beside her table, tray in hand. "It's a free country, sir," she replied neutrally. Foster sat down with a slight grunt, his knees creaking. "Getting too old for this job," he muttered, then took a bite of his burger. They ate in silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. How long have you worked on base? 3 months? Like it? Hazel shrugged. It's work. Not much of a talker, are you? No, sir, Foster chuckled. Fair enough. I can appreciate that. He took another bite, chewing thoughtfully. You know, I've been around long enough to recognize when something doesn't quite fit. You ever serve? The question was casual, but Hazel felt the weight of it. This was the danger point, the moment where one wrong word could compromise everything. Long time ago, she said, which was technically true. Her official service record ended 8 years ago, when Ghost Unit recruited her, and she died in a training accident. Everything since then was classified at levels that didn't officially exist. Thought so. Foster nodded, as if that confirmed something. The way you move, the way you assess rooms, it's familiar. Hazel said nothing, just took another bite of her sandwich. Well, Foster continued after a moment, whatever you did before, thank you for your service. And for what it's worth, those cadets who give you trouble, they're idiots. Don't let them get to you. It was kindness, simple and genuine. The second time today someone had offered her basic human decency. Hazel felt something loosen in her chest, just slightly. Thank you, sir, she said quietly. Foster finished his lunch and stood. See you around. After he left, Hazel sat for another few minutes, finishing her food and thinking. The mission was getting complicated. Too many people noticing, too many variables spinning out of control. She needed to be more careful, more controlled. But part of her, the part that had spent 15 years hiding who she really was tired of being careful. Tired of pretending to be less. Tired of letting people like Blake and Bellatrix and Connor treat her like she was nothing. That was dangerous thinking. The kind that led to blown covers and failed missions. Hazel cleared her tray and went back to work. The afternoon brought more cleaning, more invisibility, more careful performance of someone small and powerless. She scrubbed floors, emptied trash, restocked supplies. The work was mindless, which gave her too much time to think. At 1500 hours, she was cleaning windows in the administrative building when she heard a commotion from one of the offices. Raised voices, something crashing. Then Master Chief Logan Fraser's voice, calm but firm. Everyone settle down. Now. Hazel moved closer, not quite eavesdropping, but positioned to hear. This is unacceptable. That was Bellatrix, her voice shrill with anger. He deliberately sabotaged my equipment. I didn't touch your stuff. A male voice, defensive. Then explain why my tactical vest was in the wrong locker with half the pouches missing. Maybe you just forgot where you put it, princess. Don't call me that. Enough. Fraser's voice cut through the argument like a blade. Cadet Carla, Cadet Morrison, you're both on report for conduct unbecoming. Now get out of my office before I make it worse. Footsteps. Bellatrix stormed past Hazel without seeing her, her face red with fury. The male cadet followed, smirking. Hazel went back to cleaning windows, processing the interaction. Equipment sabotage. Interpersonal conflicts escalating. These were the kinds of stress fractures that revealed true character, the whole point of this assessment. And so far, the cadets were failing spectacularly. She finished the windows and moved on to the next task on her checklist, restocking the briefing room supplies. Again, Connor's mess had set her back hours, and she was behind schedule. The briefing room was empty when she arrived, which was a relief. Hazel worked quickly, replacing materials, organizing equipment, making sure everything was exactly where it needed to be. She was reaching for supplies on a high shelf when she heard footsteps behind her. Need help with that? Hazel turned to find Seaman Mason Carter standing in the doorway. He was young, maybe 25, with an open, friendly face and the slightly nervous energy of someone who hadn't yet learned to hide what they were thinking. I'm fine, thank you, Hazel replied, turning back to her work. No, really, let me. Mason crossed the room and easily reached the supplies she'd been stretching for. He handed them down with a smile. There you go. Thank you. Mason lingered, shifting his weight from foot to foot. So, I wanted to ask you something, and you can totally tell me to mind my own business if I'm out of line. Hazel waited, her body language neutral, but her mind racing through threat assessments. That thing you did this morning, Mason continued, catching that spring, that was incredible reflexes, like really incredible, military-level incredible. Hazel kept her expression blank. It was luck. Was it? Mason's voice was gentle, not accusatory. Because I've been around enough operators to recognize training when I see it. And the way you move, the way you assess rooms, he paused. You ever serve in an operational capacity? This was it, the moment of decision. Lie completely and risk him digging deeper out of curiosity. Tell partial truth and hope it satisfied him, or shut down the conversation entirely. Speaking of tactical awareness, let me tell you about something that's revolutionizing how military personnel stay connected in the field. Advanced tactical communication devices designed for extreme environments are now available for civilian use. These ruggedized smartphones feature military-grade encryption, satellite connectivity, and can withstand drops from over 6 feet. They're perfect for outdoor enthusiasts, first responders, or anyone who needs reliable communication in challenging conditions. With battery life lasting up to 72 hours and waterproof ratings that exceed military standards, these devices represent the cutting edge of mobile technology. Hazel chose option 2. I was a medic, long time ago, never saw combat. It was a safe lie. Medical training would explain the reflexes, the calm under pressure, the way she carried herself, but it was distant enough from special operations to deflect serious scrutiny. Mason's face lit up. A medic? That's awesome. How long did you serve? 4 years. Got out. Needed a change. Hazel shrugged, trying to project casual indifference. This job pays the bills. Well, for what it's worth, I think it's cool. And those cadets who give you trouble, they're jerks. You deserve better. Mason's sincerity was almost painful in its earnestness. If you ever need someone to vouch for you or anything, I'm happy to help. Something about his kindness, the third person today to offer unprompted support, made Hazel's carefully constructed walls crack just slightly. Thank you, Mason, she said, using his name for the first time. That means more than you know. He grinned. Anytime. And hey, if you ever want to grab coffee and swap war stories, well, medical stories, I'm around. After he left, Hazel stood alone in the briefing room, staring at nothing. 3 people in one day had seen past her disguise, had recognized something in her that didn't match the cover story. That was too many. Way too many. She needed to be more careful, more controlled, more invisible. But another part of her, the part that remembered what it felt like to be acknowledged, to be seen for what she really was, wanted to throw caution away and reveal everything, to stop hiding, to stand up and show these arrogant cadets exactly who they'd been dismissing. That was pride talking. Pride got operators killed. Hazel finished her work and checked the time. 16:45 hours, almost end of shift. Just 1 more hour of being invisible, then she could retreat to her quarters and drop the performance. She was pushing her cart down the corridor when she heard the alarm. Not a fire alarm or security alert, a medical emergency klaxon. The kind that meant someone was seriously injured and needed immediate attention. Hazel's training kicked in before thought. She abandoned her cart and ran toward the sound, her careful invisibility forgotten. Other personnel were running too, all converging on the physical training facility. Inside, chaos. A cadet was on the ground, seizing violently. Foam at his mouth, eyes rolled back. 2 instructors were trying to hold him down while a third called for medical support. His airway's blocked, one instructor shouted. Someone help! Hazel pushed through the crowd, her mind switching into combat medic mode. She'd seen seizures before, hundreds of them, in conditions far worse than this. She knew exactly what to do, but doing it would blow her cover completely. For 3 seconds, Hazel stood frozen, trapped between mission parameters and moral imperative. Let someone else handle it and maintain operational security, or intervene and risk everything. The cadet's lips were turning blue. Hazel dropped to her knees beside him, her hands moving with practiced precision. Roll him on his side, now. Support his head. The instructors obeyed automatically, responding to the command in her voice. Hazel checked his airway, cleared the obstruction with swift, expert movements. Someone time the seizure. I need to know duration. She placed 2 fingers on his carotid artery, counting heartbeats. Elevated, but not dangerously so. Good sign. Who are you? One instructor demanded. Former combat medic, Hazel replied, not looking up. How long since the seizure started? Maybe 90 seconds. Any history of epilepsy? Not that I know of. Hazel continued her assessment, checking pupil response, looking for signs of head trauma or drug interaction. The seizure was slowing, the cadet's body relaxing. She maintained his position, keeping his airway clear, monitoring his breathing. 2 minutes later, the base medical team arrived with a stretcher and proper equipment. Hazel stepped back immediately, melting into the crowd, trying to disappear again. But Dr. Grace Willow had seen everything. The doctor pushed through to Hazel, her expression intense. "That was textbook emergency response. Where did you learn that?" "Military training, ma'am." "What was your MOS?" 68 BU, combat medic. The lie came smoothly, backed by enough technical knowledge to be believable. Dr. Grace studied her for a long moment. "You're wasted on janitorial work. Have you considered joining the medical staff? We could use someone with your skills." "I appreciate that, ma'am, but I'm happy where I am." "Are you?" Dr. Grace's voice was skeptical. "Because what I just saw wasn't someone happy pushing a mop. That was someone who's trained for high-stress medical intervention. Someone who's done this before, many times before." Hazel felt the walls closing in. Too many people asking too many questions. The mission was compromised, or about to be. "I need to get back to work," she said quietly, and turned to leave. "Wait." Dr. Grace grabbed her arm gently. "What's your name?" Hazel hesitated. Her cover name was Janet Williams. Simple, forgettable, common. But, standing here, with adrenaline still singing in her veins and the weight of too many lies pressing down, she found herself answering with something closer to truth. "Hazel. My name is Hazel." "Well, Hazel, you just saved that cadet's life. That's not nothing. You should be proud." Proud. The word landed with unexpected weight. When was the last time someone had told her to be proud? Most of Ghost Unit's work was classified, unacknowledged, existing only in sealed files that would be destroyed rather than declassified. Pride wasn't part of the equation. You did the job because it needed doing, and that was enough. Except sometimes it wasn't. "Thank you, ma'am," Hazel said, and this time she meant it completely. She retrieved her cart and finished the last hour of her shift in a daze, her mind replaying the incident over and over. She'd blown operational security. Multiple witnesses had seen her demonstrate skills far beyond what a janitor should possess. Admiral Oswald would hear about it. Her handler would hear about it. The mission was compromised. But the cadet was alive. That had to count for something. At 1800 hours, Hazel clocked out and headed to her quarters. She lived in a small efficiency apartment off base, deliberately separate from military housing. The space was Spartan: bed, desk, kitchenette, kitchenette, bathroom. No personal photos, no decorations, nothing that revealed who she really was. She locked the door, secured the deadbolt, and finally allowed herself to drop the performance. Her shoulders sagged, tension releasing in a long exhale. She was exhausted, not from the physical work, but from the constant mental effort of being someone else. Hazel pulled out her secure phone, the real one, not the cheap civilian model she carried for show, and checked for messages. Nothing from her handler. Maybe the incident hadn't been reported yet. Maybe she had a few more hours before the mission was officially scrubbed. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her hands. These hands had assembled weapons in the dark, applied tourniquets under fire, killed enemies, and saved teammates. They were tools, weapons, instruments of survival, and today they'd pushed a mop and been dismissed as belonging to someone weak and worthless. Hazel laughed, a short, bitter sound. 15 years in Ghost Unit, 47 missions across 7 countries, 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars, a Navy Cross for actions in Syria that officially never happened. And here she was, feeling sorry for herself because some punk cadets had hurt her feelings. Pathetic. Except it wasn't about hurt feelings. It was about the fundamental injustice of being invisible, of having her identity erased, of spending her entire career pretending to be less than she was, and doing it willingly because the mission mattered more than recognition. But sometimes, just sometimes, she wished someone would see her. Really see her. Not the cover identity, not the carefully constructed performance, but the real woman underneath. Someone who'd given everything to her country and gotten anonymity in return. Hazel's phone buzzed. Secure message incoming. She opened it with a sense of inevitability. Here it was. Mission scrubbed. Extract immediately. Don't compromise operational security further. But the message wasn't from her handler. It was from Admiral Oswald himself. Heard about the medical incident? Well done. Assessment continues. Maintain cover. Hazel read it 3 times, trying to parse the subtext. The Admiral knew her real identity, obviously. He had authorized this entire operation. But maintain cover suggested the mission wasn't compromised, which meant the medical incident, while attention-grabbing, hadn't revealed too much. Or maybe it had revealed exactly what the Admiral wanted revealed. This whole assessment wasn't just about evaluating cadets. It was about testing something else. Testing whether they could recognize leadership and competence when it didn't come in the expected package. So far, they were failing. Hazel set down the phone and changed into civilian clothes, jeans and a plain t-shirt, the kind of anonymous outfit that helped her blend into any crowd. She made a simple dinner, ate mechanically, and tried to plan for tomorrow. More cleaning, more invisibility, more careful performance of being less than she was. But now, with an added complication, too many people were noticing. Captain Foster, Petty Officer Mia, Seaman Mason, Dr. Grace, each one seeing past the disguise, recognizing something that didn't fit. The question was whether that would help or hurt the mission parameters. And what would happen when the cadets, especially Blake, Bellatrix, and Connor, finally figured out who she really was. Hazel smiled grimly. She was actually looking forward to that moment. The look on Blake's face when he realized he'd pressed a gun to a SEAL commander's head. Bellatrix's horror when she understood she'd been lecturing a ghost unit operator about weakness. Connor's panic when his sabotage came back to haunt him. It would be satisfying. Deeply, personally satisfying. But satisfaction wasn't the mission. Assessment was. And that meant maintaining cover just a little bit longer, no matter how many people started asking questions. Hazel finished her dinner, cleaned up, and went to bed early. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests. She needed to be ready. As she drifted off to sleep, her last conscious thought was a memory from Kandahar, her first Purple Heart. An IED had torn through their convoy, killed 2 teammates, wounded 4 more. She'd spent 6 hours under fire, treating casualties while directing the defensive position. When reinforcements finally arrived, the captain in charge had taken one look at her, covered in blood, exhausted, holding her position through sheer will, and said 5 words she'd never forgotten. "Who the hell are you?" She'd answered then with the name Subishranken Unit. Tomorrow, when this mission finally ended and her real identity was revealed, she'd answer the same way. And this time, everyone would listen. Morning came too early, announced by the alarm at 0500 hours. Hazel silenced it immediately, her body already awake before the sound registered. Years of military training had rewired her circadian rhythm. She could wake at any predetermined time, fully alert within seconds, ready to respond to threats that existed only in muscle memory now. She went through her morning routine with mechanical efficiency. Shower, dress in the gray maintenance uniform, check the secure phone, no new messages. Check the civilian phone, nothing. Eat a protein bar and drink coffee black. Lock the apartment. Drive to base in her aging Toyota Corolla, the kind of unremarkable vehicle that screamed lower-income worker just trying to get by. The gate guard barely glanced at her eyed before waving her through. Just another face in the morning rush of personnel reporting for duty. Hazel parked in the civilian lot and retrieved her cleaning cart from the storage facility. The supplies Connor had sabotaged yesterday were fully restocked now, everything documented and photographed. If he tried the same trick twice, she'd have proof. The base was already buzzing with activity. PT formations ran past in synchronized cadence, their breathing rhythmic and controlled. Instructors barked orders. Somewhere in the distance, live fire exercises punctuated the morning with sharp cracks that made Hazel's shoulders tense reflexively. She began her rounds in the administrative wing, starting with the offices that opened earliest. The work was mindless, which gave her too much time to think about yesterday's complications. The medical incident had put her on people's radar. Dr. Grace's scrutiny, Mason's friendly curiosity, even Captain Foster's knowing looks. Too many variables, too many people paying attention. She was wiping down a conference table when Lieutenant Archer appeared in the doorway, his expression thoughtful. "Morning," he said, his tone neutral but his eyes assessing. "Good morning, sir," Hazel replied without looking up from her work. "Heard you helped with that medical emergency yesterday. Impressive response time." Hazel continued wiping, her movements steady. "Just did what anyone would do, sir." "Anyone with combat medic training, maybe?" Archer stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "I pulled your employment file. Says you were Army. 4 years, medical specialist." This was dangerous territory. Hazel had prepared cover stories for exactly this scenario, but having a SEAL instructor digging into her background meant the mission timeline was accelerating, whether she wanted it to or not. Yes, sir. Got out in 2016. Needed a change. From saving lives in combat zones to cleaning toilets, Archer's voice held skepticism. That's quite a change. Pays the bills. Less stressful. Is it? Archer pulled out a chair and sat, making it clear this wasn't a casual conversation he planned to end quickly. Because, from where I'm standing, you're dealing with harassment from cadets, sabotage from at least one individual, and constant disrespect from people who should know better. Doesn't sound less stressful to me. Hazel finally looked up, meeting his eyes. What do you want me to say, sir? I want you to tell me why a trained combat medic with your skill set is wasting her time here instead of working in the medical facility where those skills could actually be useful. Archer leaned forward. I've been doing this job long enough to spot talent being wasted. And I've been around long enough to know when someone's not telling the whole truth about who they are. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Hazel considered her options, deflect and risk making him more suspicious, come clean and blow the mission completely, or give him just enough truth to satisfy his curiosity without revealing operational details. Some things that happen in combat stay with you, Hazel said quietly, choosing her words carefully. After a while, you need distance from it. This job gives me that distance. It wasn't entirely a lie. She did need distance sometimes. The problem was Ghost Unit didn't believe in distance. They believed in continuous deployment until you broke or died or both. Archer studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. But for what it's worth, those cadets giving you trouble, they're being tested too. How they treat people they perceive as beneath them says a lot about their character. Most of them are failing. Is that what you'll put in your evaluation, sir? Among other things. Archer stood, moving toward the door. Keep doing your job, Hazel, and try not to let the idiots get to you. They're not worth it. After he left, Hazel stood motionless, processing the conversation. Archer knew something was off, but he didn't know what. And more importantly, he'd just confirmed her suspicion that this assessment wasn't just about her observing the cadets. It was about how the cadets treated someone they perceived as powerless. A test within a test. Layers of evaluation that none of the participants fully understood. Classic Ghost Unit methodology. Hazel finished cleaning the conference room and moved on to her next assignment, the tactical training facility. It was a massive space filled with obstacle courses, climbing walls, and simulation rooms, where cadets practiced everything from building breaches to hostage negotiations. When she arrived, a training session was already in progress. Blake stood at the center of a group, demonstrating hand-to-hand combat techniques on a practice dummy. His movements were powerful but lacked finesse, pure strength compensating for technical imprecision. The key to close-quarters combat is overwhelming force, Blake announced, demonstrating a brutal strike sequence. Hit first, hit hard, don't give them time to react. Speed and aggression win fights. Jasper raised his hand tentatively. What about leverage and technique? I read that proper body mechanics can compensate for size disadvantage. Blake's expression turned condescending. You read that, huh? Tell you what, Flynn, why don't you come up here and show us these amazing techniques you read about? The other cadets laughed, sensing blood in the water. Jasper's face flushed, but he stood and approached the practice area with visible reluctance. All right, genius, Blake said, positioning himself in a fighting stance. Show me how technique beats strength. Take your best shot. Hazel paused in her work, watching despite herself. This was going to be a humiliation exercise. Another opportunity for Blake to assert dominance and crush someone's confidence. Jasper circled cautiously, trying to remember techniques from training manuals. He attempted a wrist lock, telegraphed and poorly executed. Blake easily countered, using his superior strength to reverse the hold and force Jasper to his knees. That's your technique? Blake's voice dripped with mockery. My grandmother could have countered that. From her position near the wall, Hazel could see exactly where Jasper had gone wrong. His footwork was all wrong, weight distribution terrible, grip too weak, but more than that, he was fighting scared, letting Blake's intimidation affect his performance. She'd seen it 100 times. Skilled operators who froze under pressure, lost fights they should have won, died because fear overrode training. Maybe stick to reading books, Flynn, Blake said, releasing Jasper with a shove that sent him stumbling. Leave the fighting to people who can actually do it. The other cadets laughed again, and Jasper retreated to the back of the group, his humiliation complete. Hazel went back to her cleaning, her jaw tight. It took every ounce of self-control not to step into that training circle and demonstrate exactly how technique could overcome strength. Show Blake how a 5'4" woman could put a 6'2" man on the ground in under 3 seconds using nothing but proper leverage and precision strikes. But that would blow her cover spectacularly. So, she stayed silent, invisible, and let the injustice burn. The training session continued for another hour. Hazel worked around the edges of the room, emptying trash, wiping down equipment, maintaining her performance of someone who belonged in the background. But she watched everything, cataloging each interaction for her assessment report. Blake demonstrated leadership through intimidation, effective in the short term, but corrosive to unit cohesion. Bellatrix participated aggressively, constantly trying to prove herself equal to the men, often overcompensating with unnecessary aggression. Connor remained peripheral, making small sabotaging comments designed to undermine others without being overtly hostile. And Jasper, despite his encyclopedic knowledge, lacked the confidence to apply it under pressure. None of them were ready for actual combat operations. They had skills and training, but they lacked the maturity, judgment, and character that separated special operators from regular soldiers. When the session finally ended, the cadets filed out in clusters. Hazel was emptying the last trash can when she heard footsteps approaching. "Hey!" She turned to find Cadet Lily Hannah standing nearby, her expression uncertain. Lily was younger than most of the other cadets, maybe 22, with the kind of earnest determination that hadn't been beaten down by experience yet. "Can I ask you something?" Lily said quietly, glancing around to make sure they were alone. Hazel waited, silent. "That thing yesterday with the medical emergency, the way you handled it, that was incredible. Like, professional level incredible." Lily stepped closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Were you really just a medic? Because what I saw looked like someone who's done a lot more than basic medical training." Third time in 2 days, someone had asked essentially the same question. The mission security was degrading rapidly. "I was a medic," Hazel said, sticking to her cover. "Saw a lot of action. You learn fast in those situations or people die." "I believe that," Lily replied. "But there's something else. The way you move, the way you assess rooms, even the way you fold cleaning cloths, it's all very precise, very military, more military than someone who got out years ago should be." Hazel felt a flicker of respect for this young cadet. She was observant, analytical, willing to question what everyone else accepted at face value. Those were good qualities for a special operator. "What's your point, cadet?" "My point is that I think you're more than you appear to be," Lily said carefully. "And I think some of us, the ones who aren't complete jerks, would benefit from learning from you, if you were willing to teach." It was a dangerous offer, one that could easily compromise the mission further, but it was also an opportunity, a chance to actually accomplish something useful, instead of just documenting how terrible these cadets were. "I appreciate the thought," Hazel said slowly, "but I'm just here to clean. That's all." Lily's expression fell, but she nodded. "Okay, I understand. But if you ever change your mind..." She pulled out a small notepad, scribbled something, and handed it to Hazel. "That's my contact info, just in case." After Lily left, Hazel looked at the paper, a phone number and email address, along with a simple message. "Thank you for yesterday. You saved someone's life. That matters." Hazel tucked the paper into her pocket, feeling that familiar crack in her carefully constructed walls. These small moments of genuine human connection were more dangerous to her cover than any security breach or suspicious investigator. If you're as hooked as I am right now, do me a favor and drop a comment below telling me what you think Hazel's real background is. Former Marine? Intelligence officer? Something else entirely? And don't forget to like this video. It really helps us bring you more incredible stories like this one. She finished her work in the training facility and moved on to the next location on her schedule, the weapons range. It was outdoor space, which meant dealing with California sun and wind, but at least it was free from the constant scrutiny of enclosed spaces. Several cadets were already there, conducting live-fire exercises under the supervision of Chief Warrant Officer Raymond Paul. Raymond was a weapons specialist with over 20 years of experience, known for his encyclopedic knowledge of firearms and his zero-tolerance policy for safety violations. Hazel began her work at the far end of the range, collecting spent brass casings and ensuring the area was clean for the next training rotation. The rhythmic crack of gunfire provided a familiar soundtrack, one that brought back memories of operations where every shot had real consequences. "Cadet Anderson, your grouping is all over the place," Raymond's voice carried across the range. "What's going on?" "Wind, sir," Blake replied, his frustration evident. "It's throwing off my shots. Wind is a constant in combat. You compensate for it. Try again, and this time adjust your breathing pattern." Blake fired another series of shots. Hazel could tell from the sound and rhythm that he was rushing, not taking time to center himself between rounds. Frustration leading to sloppiness. "Still scattered," Raymond announced after checking the target. "You're forcing it. Combat shooting isn't about strength or aggression. It's about control and precision." "I know that, sir," Blake said, his tone defensive. "Do you? Because right now, you're shooting like someone trying to prove something instead of someone trying to hit the target." Hazel continued collecting brass, but her attention was divided. She'd trained hundreds of operators on marksmanship, had personal certifications in 7 weapon systems, held records for long-distance precision shooting that were classified because they'd been set during operations that officially never happened. Watching Blake struggle with basic wind compensation was almost physically painful. "All right, everyone take 5, Raymond called out. "Hydrate, check your equipment, and we'll run another iteration." The cadets moved to the shade, grabbing water bottles and discussing their performances. Hazel worked her way closer to the firing line, inspecting the areas that would need the most attention after the session ended. "You there?" Hazel looked up to find Raymond approaching, his expression curious. "You were here yesterday during the qualification exercises, weren't you?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Just cleaning." "Right, cleaning." Raymond pulled out a pair of shooting glasses and a magazine from one of the range bags. "Humor me for a second. Ever fire a weapon?" This was a trap, had to be, testing her, seeing if she'd reveal more than her cover allowed. "Basic training, sir." "Long time ago." "Uh-huh." Raymond held out the glasses and magazine. "Would you mind helping me with something? I need to test this magazine. Been having feeding issues. Just need someone to fire a few rounds so I can observe the malfunction." It was such an obvious setup that Hazel almost laughed, but refusing would be more suspicious than complying with a direct request from a senior warrant officer. "If you think it'll help, sir." Raymond led her to the firing line, set up a target at 25 meters, and handed her a Sig Sauer M18, the standard-issue sidearm for special operations. Hazel took the weapon, performed an automatic safety check that revealed years of ingrained habit, and loaded the magazine. "Just fire at a comfortable pace," Raymond said, stepping back. "I'm watching the ejection pattern." Hazel brought the weapon up, settled into a proper isosceles stance, controlled her breathing, and fired 3 rounds in rapid succession. Center mass, tight grouping, textbook execution. She lowered the weapon, cleared HUD, and handed it back to Raymond. "Magazine seems fine to me, sir." Raymond stared at the target, then at her, then back at the target. "That's a 3-inch grouping at 25 meters with a weapon you've supposedly never fired before. After not shooting for years, in wind conditions that are giving my trained cadets trouble." Hazel said nothing, keeping her expression neutral. "You want to explain that?" Raymond pressed. "Lucky shots, sir." 3 lucky shots, all center mass. With perfect stance and breathing control, Raymond's voice was skeptical but not hostile. "You know what I think? I think you're a lot more than a former medic who cleaned bedpans." Before Hazel could respond, Blake's voice cut through the moment. "Chief, is there a problem?" Raymond turned, his expression shifting to professional neutrality. "No problem, cadet. Just running a test. Get back to your firing position." Blake looked between Raymond and Hazel, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. She was shooting? "Equipment test. None of your concern." But Blake wasn't letting it go. He moved closer, his posture aggressive. "With all due respect, sir, why is civilian staff handling weapons on an active range? That seems like a security violation." "With all due respect, cadet, your job is to follow orders, not question my decisions about range management." Raymond's voice hardened. "Now get back to your position before I make you run the obstacle course in full gear." Blake retreated, but his expression promised this wasn't over. He'd seen something that didn't fit his understanding of how the world worked, and his pride wouldn't let him ignore it. Hazel collected the spent brass from her demonstration shots and moved away from the firing line, her mind racing. That had been a mistake, a significant one. She'd let Raymond bait her into revealing skills that no civilian maintenance worker should possess, and she'd done it in front of witnesses. The mission was unraveling. Too many people asking questions. Too many demonstrations of abilities that contradicted her cover identity. Admiral Oswald had said to maintain cover, but at this point, maintaining cover meant acting deliberately incompetent, which could compromise the assessment itself. She was trapped between operational security and mission objectives, with no clear path forward. Hazel spent the rest of the afternoon in a state of heightened awareness, knowing that Blake would try something. He'd seen her competence with a weapon, and his fragile ego wouldn't tolerate being potentially outclassed by someone he'd dismissed as worthless. The confrontation came at 1600 hours, when Hazel was restocking supplies in the main corridor outside the briefing rooms. She heard them before she saw them, Blake, Connor, and 3 other cadets, their footsteps deliberate and aggressive. Well, Blake said, blocking her path. The mysterious janitor who's apparently also a crack shot. Want to tell us what else you are hiding? Hazel kept her eyes down, her posture submissive. I'm not hiding anything, just trying to do my job. Your job. Connor moved to her other side, boxing her in, which apparently includes showing up trained operators. That's interesting. It was just a few shots, beginner's luck. 3 perfect center mass shots in windy conditions isn't luck, Blake said, his voice low and threatening. That's training, professional training. So, either you've been lying about who you are, or Chief Raymond was lying about your performance. Which is it? The other cadets had formed a loose circle around her, cutting off escape routes. It was a classic intimidation tactic. Use numbers and positioning to make the target feel powerless, force a reaction, establish dominance. Hazel had been on the receiving end of this kind of pressure dozens of times during her career, usually in significantly more dangerous circumstances. 5 aggressive cadets in a well-lit corridor weren't exactly a threat compared to hostile interrogations in Syrian prison cells, but showing that she wasn't intimidated would blow her cover completely, so she played the role they expected. Please, she said, her voice small and frightened. I don't want any trouble. Too late for that, Connor said. You made yourself trouble the moment you decided to show off on the range. Blake stepped closer, using his size to loom over her. I think you owe us some answers, starting with what your real background is and why you're really here. This was escalating fast. Hazel's tactical assessment ran through options. Submit completely and hope they get bored. Try to de-escalate verbally. Make a scene to attract authority figures. Or demonstrate exactly why cornering a ghost unit operator was a catastrophically bad idea. She chose option 2. My background doesn't matter, Hazel said, keeping her voice steady. I'm here to work, that's all. Now, please let me pass. Let you pass, Blake laughed, and the others joined in. You don't get to make demands. You're just the help. You go where we tell you to go, when we tell you to go. He reached out and grabbed her arm, not violently, but with enough force to be controlling. Now, we're going to have a conversation about... The rest of his sentence died as Hazel moved. It was pure reflex, trained into her over thousands of hours. Someone grabs your arm in a hostile situation, you break the grip and establish control. Her free hand came up, struck Blake's wrist at the pressure point, broke his hold. She stepped back, creating distance, hands up in a defensive posture that was anything but submissive. The transformation was instant. 1 second she was hunched and frightened. The next she was balanced, centered, every line of her body radiating controlled readiness. Blake stared at his hand, shocked. What the... Don't touch me, Hazel said, and her voice had changed too. No longer whispered and uncertain. This was the voice that had given orders under fire, commanded respect from hardened operators, made enemies hesitate in their final moments. The corridor had gone silent. The other cadets stared, trying to process what they'd just seen. Then Blake's shock transformed into rage. You just assaulted a military cadet. That's a criminal offense. You grabbed me first, Hazel replied calmly. That's assault. I defended myself. That's legal. We all saw what happened, Connor added quickly. You attacked Cadet Anderson unprovoked. Did I? Hazel looked at each of them in turn. Are you all willing to lie in official statements? Because if this goes to an investigation, the truth will come out, and I promise you, the truth won't favor your version of events. There was something in her voice, a certainty, an authority, that made them hesitate. They'd expected her to crumble under pressure, to break down or run away. Instead, she was standing her ground, challenging them, showing absolutely no fear. It didn't fit. Nothing about this situation fit their understanding of who she was supposed to be. "This isn't over," Blake said finally, retreating half a step. "I'm reporting this to Lieutenant Archer." "Good," Hazel replied. "I'll make my own report about being cornered and assaulted by 5 cadets. Should make for interesting reading." She pushed past them, leaving them standing in shocked silence, and continued down the corridor with her cart. Her heart was pounding, adrenaline singing in her veins, but she kept her pace steady and controlled. That had been a mistake, another one. She'd revealed too much, reacted too competently, shown exactly the kind of training that contradicted every aspect of her cover identity. The mission was blown, had to be. No way to explain what just happened, in a way consistent with being a former Army medic who'd gotten out years ago. Hazel made it to the nearest women's restroom, locked herself in a stall, and finally allowed herself to process what had just happened. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of controlling her response. Blake had grabbed her, and every instinct screamed to put him on the ground, establish dominance, neutralize the threat. She'd barely managed to stop at a simple wrist break. 5 minutes later, after her breathing had normalized and her hands steadied, Hazel emerged from the stall. She checked her appearance in the mirror, slightly disheveled, but nothing that suggested complete loss of composure. Her secure phone buzzed. Message from Admiral Oswald. "Incident reported. Recommend immediate extraction to my office for debrief." So it was over. Blake had already run to his superiors, spinning whatever version of events made him look best. The mission was terminated, and now came damage control. Hazel sent a brief acknowledgement and headed toward the Admiral's office complex. She maintained her cleaning cart cover, pushing it through the corridors like any other day, but internally she was already composing her after-action report and preparing for the conversation ahead. The Admiral's secretary, a stern woman in her 50s, who'd probably seen every kind of military drama imaginable, looked up when Hazel arrived. "He's expecting you. Go on in." Hazel abandoned her cart and entered the Admiral's office. It was spacious and professionally decorated, with flags, commendations, and photos documenting a distinguished career. Admiral Henry Oswald sat behind a massive desk, his weathered face grave. "Close the door," he said without preamble. Hazel complied, then stood at attention. "Sir, at ease." Oswald gestured to a chair. "Sit. We need to talk." Hazel sat, her posture military straight despite the civilian clothes. "I've received 3 separate reports in the last 2 hours, Oswald began, pulling up files on his computer. One from Cadet Anderson claiming you assaulted him without provocation. One from Chief Warrant Officer Raymond, stating you demonstrated advanced marksmanship skills inconsistent with your cover identity. And one from Lieutenant Archer expressing concerns about your background." He looked up, his eyes sharp. "Want to tell me your version?" Hazel gave a concise tactical debrief. Just the facts, no editorializing. The confrontation with Blake, the weapons test with Raymond, Archer's questions. When she finished, Oswald leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You realize you've compromised operational security," he said. "Yes, sir. Mission should be terminated and extraction executed immediately." "Terminated?" Oswald's eyebrows rose. "Commander, this mission is just getting interesting." Hazel blinked. "Sir? Do you know what the goal of this assessment was?" Oswald asked. "It wasn't just to evaluate cadets' tactical skills or physical capabilities. It was to test something much more fundamental, whether they could recognize leadership and competence when it didn't come in the package they expected." He stood and moved to the window, looking out over the base. "The military is changing. We need operators who can think beyond traditional hierarchies, who can identify threats and allies regardless of appearance or preconceptions. The cadets who've been harassing you, they've been failing that test spectacularly. With respect, sir, they don't know who I am. They see a maintenance worker, they treat her accordingly. That's not necessarily a failure of judgment. Isn't it?" Oswald turned back to face her. "Captain Foster recognized something off about you within hours. Petty Officer Mia saw past the uniform immediately. Seaman Carter identified military training. Dr. Willow noted advanced medical skills. Lieutenant Archer suspected you were more than you claimed. Even Cadet Hannah, the youngest and least experienced of the group, figured out something didn't add up." He moved back to his desk, pulling up more files. But Anderson, Carla, and Royd, they saw exactly what they expected to see and never questioned it. They were so certain of their superiority that they couldn't conceive of the possibility that the person they were dismissing might be their superior in every meaningful way. Hazel was beginning to understand. This was always going to end with revelation. Eventually, yes. Though I'll admit, I expected it to take longer than 3 days. Oswald smiled slightly. You're too competent to hide completely, Commander. It's one of your few weaknesses. So, what happens now? Now? Oswald's smile widened. Now we see how they react when they learn the truth, because that reaction will tell me everything I need to know about whether they're ready for special operations. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. Tomorrow morning, 0800 hours, there's a special briefing scheduled for all SEAL candidates. You'll be there, in uniform, full credentials on display, and we're going to watch their world collapse. Hazel opened the folder. Inside was her official service record, the unclassified version at least. Commander Hazel Morrison, SEAL Team 7, 15 years of service, multiple deployments, 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars, Navy Cross, expert instructor certifications in weapons, tactics, and combat medicine. The Ghost Unit details were conspicuously absent. Those would remain classified, but there was more than enough here to make the point. This is going to destroy some of them, Hazel said quietly. Good. If having their preconceptions challenged destroys them, they don't belong in special operations. Oswald's voice was firm. The operators we need, the ones who'll survive the next generation of warfare, are the ones who can adapt, learn, and grow. The ones who can't, better they wash out here than get people killed in the field. Hazel looked at the service record, feeling a mix of emotions she couldn't quite name. Relief that the performance was ending. Anticipation of seeing Blake's face when he realized who he had been threatening. But also something like sadness, because once this mask came off, she could never put it back on. Permission to speak freely, sir? Always, Commander. Some of them aren't bad people. They're young, arrogant, and stupid, but they have potential. Lily Hanna, Jasper Flynn, even Liam Bradley. They could be good operators with the right guidance. I agree, which is why I want you to provide that guidance. Oswald pulled up another document. Your next assignment, after this assessment concludes, is as an instructor here at Coronado. 6-month rotation, teaching advanced tactics and leadership to SEAL candidates. You'll get to shape the next generation of operators, and maybe prevent some of them from becoming the kind of prejudiced idiots who can't see past their own assumptions. An instructor position, 6 months of stability, teaching instead of operating. No classified missions, no deep cover, no pretending to be someone else. Just being exactly who she was, acknowledged and recognized. It sounded almost like a vacation. I accept, sir. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Teaching these kids might be harder than any combat mission you've run. Oswald closed the folders. Go home, Commander. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be memorable. Hazel stood, came to attention, and saluted. Oswald returned it with the kind of respect that made something tight in her chest finally loosen. She left the office, retrieved her cleaning cart one last time, and finished her shift in a daze. Tomorrow, everything would change. The performance would end. The truth would emerge, and a lot of arrogant young cadets were going to learn a lesson they'd never forget. That evening, Hazel received another visitor at her apartment, Captain Foster, in civilian clothes, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Heard you had an interesting day, he said when she opened the door. You could say that. Hazel stepped aside to let him in. How did you know where I live? I'm very good at my job, Foster replied with a slight smile. He handed her one of the coffees. Figured you might need this. They sat in her small living room, the silence comfortable rather than awkward. Finally, Foster spoke. I knew from the first day you weren't what you claimed to be. The way you moved, the way you assessed the space, that's not civilian behavior. That's operator behavior. He took a sip of coffee. But I also knew there had to be a reason for the cover, so I kept my mouth shut and waited to see how it played out. Thank you for that, Hazel said sincerely. Don't thank me. I'm just sorry you had to deal with those kids acting like fools. Foster's expression darkened. Blake, especially. He's got all the physical tools to be a great operator, but his character is questionable. The way he treats people he perceives as weaker tells you everything about what kind of teammate he'll be. He'll find out tomorrow who he was really dealing with. Good. Maybe it'll teach him something. Though honestly, I have my doubts. Foster finished his coffee and stood. Anyway, I just wanted to check in, make sure you were okay, and to say that I'm looking forward to working with you as a fellow instructor instead of watching you pretend to be someone you're not. After he left, Hazel sat alone, processing the day. The mission had reached its inflection point. Tomorrow would bring revelation, consequences, and transformation. For the cadets, for her, for everyone involved. She pulled out Lily's note from her pocket and stared at it. Thank you for yesterday. You saved someone's life. That matters. It did matter, more than medals or recognition or proving she was better than everyone who doubted her. The work mattered. The mission mattered. Making sure the next generation of operators was better than the last. That mattered most of all. Hazel slept better that night than she had in months. We're about to get to the biggest reveal of this story, and I promise you, it's going to be absolutely worth the wait. But before we do, if you haven't already, smash that like button and share this video with someone who loves military stories. Trust me, they'll thank you later. Morning came with crystalline clarity. Hazel went through her routine, but this time she dressed differently. Not in the gray maintenance uniform, but in her Navy service dress blues. The uniform she'd earned through blood and sacrifice, the one that displayed her rank, her ribbons, her credentials. Commander Hazel Morrison, not a disguise, not a performance, just the truth. She looked at herself in the mirror, the woman she really was, finally visible. It felt strange after days of hiding, strange but also right. The drive to base was the same route she'd taken every morning, but everything felt different. The guard at the gate actually looked at her ID this time, his eyes widening as he took in the rank insignia and ribbons. He straightened unconsciously, respect replacing the dismissive indifference she'd received all week. Good morning, Commander. Welcome to Coronado. Thank you, Petty Officer. Hazel parked not in the civilian lot, but in the designated officer parking. She walked across the base with her head up, shoulders back, every inch the naval officer she'd worked 15 years to become. Personnel she passed came to attention, saluted, recognized her as someone who mattered. It was intoxicating and slightly sad at the same time, because nothing about her competence or capability had changed, only the uniform. Only the visible markers of status and authority. The message was clear. People saw what they expected to see, and most people expected nothing from a maintenance worker. At 07:45 hours, Hazel arrived at the main briefing auditorium. It was a large space, designed to hold over 200 personnel for major announcements and training sessions. This morning, it held only the SEAL candidates from the current class, about 40 young men and women, all wondering why they'd been called to a special briefing with no advance notice. Blake sat near the front, surrounded by his usual circle. Bellatrix was there too, looking annoyed at the interruption to her training schedule. Connor sat alone, his expression calculating as he tried to figure out the angle. Jasper was in the middle rows, nervously checking his watch. Lily sat near the back, her attention focused and alert. None of them noticed when Hazel entered through the side door and took a position near the stage. At precisely 0800 hours, Admiral Oswald strode to the podium. The room snapped to attention. As you were, take your seats. Oswald's voice filled the space with natural authority. This morning, we're going to discuss something critically important for your future as special operators. The ability to recognize competence and leadership regardless of external factors. He clicked a button, and an image appeared on the screen behind him. Hazel, in her maintenance uniform, cleaning equipment. The photo must have been taken by base security cameras. Over the past few days, this woman has been working on base in a civilian maintenance capacity. Most of you have seen her. Some of you have interacted with her. Oswald's voice was neutral, but there was an edge beneath it. How many of you took the time to actually see who she was beyond the uniform she wore? Confused challenge from the audience. Let me tell you who you were really dealing with. Oswald clicked again, and Hazel's official service record appeared on screen. The reaction was instantaneous. Gasps, shocked exclamations, the rustle of 40 people suddenly sitting up straighter and paying much closer attention. Commander Hazel Morrison, 15 years of active service, 3 Purple Hearts earned in combat operations across Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, 2 Bronze Stars for valor, Navy Cross for actions that remain classified, expert instructor certifications in weapons systems, tactical operations, combat medicine, and special reconnaissance. Each credential hit like a physical blow. Hazel watched the cadets' faces, seeing the progression from shock to disbelief to dawning horror. Blake had gone pale. Bellatrix looked like she might be sick. Connor's calculating expression had frozen into something resembling panic. Commander Morrison has spent the past 3 days conducting a special assessment, Oswald continued. Not of your tactical skills or physical capabilities. We already know you're competent in those areas. She was assessing your character, your judgment, your ability to recognize leadership when it doesn't conform to your preconceptions. He paused, letting that sink in. Some of you passed this assessment. You recognized that something didn't add up. You looked past the surface and saw the person beneath. Captain Foster, Petty Officer Mia Kezia, Seaman Mason Carter, Dr. Grace Willow, Lieutenant Archer, Cadet Lily Hanna. You all demonstrated the kind of observational skills and open-minded assessment that make great operators. Those names straightened with visible pride. But others, Oswald's voice hardened. Others failed spectacularly. You saw a maintenance worker and assumed weakness. You saw a woman and assumed incompetence. You saw someone in a lower social position and assumed you had the right to treat them with disrespect, harassment, and in some cases, outright assault. Blake had shrunk in his seat, trying to become invisible. Too late for that. Cadet Blake Anderson, stand up. Blake stood on shaking legs, his face scarlet. You put a weapon to Commander Morrison's head as a joke. You mocked her repeatedly. You organized harassment against her. Yesterday, you physically grabbed her in a threatening manner. Oswald's voice was ice. In a combat situation, those actions against a superior officer would constitute grounds for court-martial. Here and now, they constitute grounds for immediate dismissal from the SEAL training program. Sir, I didn't know, Blake started. You didn't know because you didn't bother to look. You made assumptions based on superficial appearance and never questioned them. That kind of blindness gets people killed in the field. Oswald gestured. Military police are waiting outside to escort you off base. You're done here. 2 MPs entered and stood by Blake. He looked around desperately, but no one met his eyes. Even his friends had distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with his disgrace. As Blake was let out, Oswald continued. Cadet Bellatrix Carla, stand up. Bellatrix stood, her face blank with shock. You repeatedly insulted Commander Morrison about her perceived weakness and your concern that she made all women look bad. The irony of that position should be obvious now. You're dismissed from the program as well. Bellatrix opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. She walked out under her own power, her career destroyed. Cadet Connor roared. Connor stood, and for the first time since Hazel had met him, his calculating mask slipped completely. He looked terrified. Sabotage, harassment, conspiracy to assault. You're lucky Commander Morrison declined to press criminal charges, or you'd be facing a court-martial instead of just expulsion. Get out. Connor fled. 3 cadets gone in 3 minutes. The room was deathly silent, everyone else wondering if they were next. The rest of you have varying degrees of culpability, Oswald said, his voice slightly softer. Some of you laughed at the harassment. Some of you participated in the disrespect. Some of you just looked the other way. None of that is acceptable for special operators. He paused, then gestured toward Hazel. Commander Morrison has agreed to serve as an instructor here for the next 6 months. During that time, you will have the opportunity to learn from one of the most experienced operators in the Navy. You will learn tactical skills, combat medicine, weapons expertise, and most importantly, you will learn character and judgment. Oswald looked directly at Jasper, at Lily, at several others who'd shown potential. For those of you who demonstrated the right qualities, curiosity, open-mindedness, respect for others regardless of position, this is an incredible opportunity. Don't waste it. He stepped back. Commander Morrison will now address you directly. Hazel moved to the podium, feeling the weight of 40 pairs of eyes. She let the silence stretch, holding their attention. I didn't want this assignment, she said finally. I was told to come here, assess your character, and file a report. Simple, clean, no complications. She scanned the audience, making eye contact with individuals. But you complicated it. You revealed who you really are when you think no one important is watching. And what I saw from some of you was disappointing. Hazel's voice hardened. Special operations isn't just about physical strength or tactical skills. It's about judgment, character, and the ability to see clearly when everyone else is blinded by assumptions. In the field, Your life depends on recognizing threats that don't look threatening, on finding allies who don't look like allies, on understanding that the universe doesn't care about your preconceptions. She let that settle, then softened slightly. But I also saw potential. I saw people who asked questions, who noticed details, who treated a maintenance worker with basic human decency because that's who they are as people. Those qualities matter more than any physical capability. Lily was sitting forward, absorbing every word. Jasper looked like he might cry from relief that he wasn't being expelled. Military service members understand the importance of protecting their future, which is why specialized insurance programs for veterans and active duty personnel have become essential. These comprehensive coverage plans offer benefits specifically tailored to military families, including deployment protection, combat zone coverage, and transition support for those leaving service. With competitive rates that recognize the discipline and reliability of military-trained individuals, these programs provide peace of mind during and after service. Many include investment components that grow tax-free, creating long-term financial security for families who've sacrificed so much. Starting tomorrow, I'll be your instructor for advanced tactical operations, Hazel continued. For those who remain in this program, I will push you harder than you've ever been pushed. I will demand excellence not just in physical skills, but in judgment, character, and ethical decision-making, because those are the qualities that separate good operators from great ones. She paused, then allowed herself a slight smile. And if any of you ever point a weapon at my head again, even in jest, I will demonstrate exactly why that's a mistake you only make once. Clear? Nervous laughter rippled through the room, breaking the tension. Dismissed, Oswald announced. Regular training schedules resume tomorrow, with Commander Morrison integrated into your instructor rotation. Don't be late. The cadets filed out in stunned silence. As they left, several approached Hazel, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Lily reached her first. Commander, I just want to say, that was incredible. Everything you did, the way you handled all of it. I learned more from watching you this week than from any classroom instruction. Thank you, Cadet Hannah. That's exactly what I hoped you'd take away from this. Jasper was next, his words tumbling over themselves. Ma'am, I'm so sorry for not speaking up more. I saw Blake and the others treating you badly, and I should have said something. Cadet Flynn, Hazel's voice was gentle but firm. You can't change the past. You can only learn from it and do better going forward. That's what I expect from you. One by one they came, some apologetic, some curious, all showing the kind of respect they should have shown from the beginning. Mason Carter greeted her with a salute and a grin. Knew it. I absolutely knew you were more than you claimed. Good instincts, Seaman. Can I ask what your actual specialty was? Because combat medic doesn't cover those shooting skills. That's classified. Hazel's smile took the edge off the words. But you'll find out some of it during training. When the last cadet had left, Captain Foster approached. Well, that was something. Felt good, Hazel admitted. Is that terrible? Completely human. You earned that moment. Foster looked toward the door where Blake had been escorted out. Think he learned anything? Honestly, probably not. His ego won't let him. He'll spend the next 20 years telling anyone who will listen in about how he was unfairly targeted, how the system is rigged, how he was the real victim. Hazel shrugged. But that's not my problem anymore. And the others? The ones who stayed? They have potential, especially Hannah and Flynn. With proper guidance, they could be exceptional operators. Foster nodded. Good, because they need guidance from someone like you, someone who understands what it's really like out there. Admiral Oswald was the last to approach. Well executed, Commander. You handled that perfectly. Thank you, sir. Though I have to ask, did you know it would escalate to that weapons incident on the range? I suspected something would force your hand eventually. These assessments always do. Oswald's expression became more serious. For what it's worth, I'm glad it happened. Those cadets needed to learn this lesson now, in training, where the consequences are embarrassment and career setbacks. Better than learning it in combat, where the consequences are body bags. Agreed, sir. Your quarters are ready in officer housing. We've transferred all your belongings from the civilian apartment, and your classroom assignment starts tomorrow at 0900 hours. Oswald handed her a tablet. This is your first class roster. 25 candidates, all of whom will be on their absolute best behavior after this morning's demonstration. Hazel scrolled through the names, already making mental notes about which students needed which types of instruction. This was going to be different from anything she'd done before. No deep cover, no classified missions, just straightforward teaching and mentoring. It felt almost normal. She wasn't sure how to feel about that. That afternoon, Hazel moved into her new quarters, a small but comfortable apartment in officer housing, with a living room that didn't echo, a bedroom with actual furniture, and a kitchen that suggested she might occasionally cook, instead of just surviving on protein bars and coffee. There was a knock at her door while she was unpacking. Petty Officer Mia stood outside, holding a plate covered in foil. "Welcome to the neighborhood," Mia said, her smile warm. "I made cookies. Figured you might want something sweet after the morning you had." "That's very kind. Thank you." Hazel accepted the plate, surprised by the gesture. "Also, I wanted to apologize." Mia's expression turned serious. "I saw how they were treating you, and I should have done more. Should have reported it, or stood up for you, or something. You treated me with basic human decency. That's more than most people managed." Hazel set down the cookies. "And for what it's worth, that mattered. Those small moments of kindness kept me from completely losing faith in these programs." Mia's eyes glistened slightly. "Well, I'm glad you're staying. And if you ever need anything, coffee, conversation, someone to vent to about how frustrating teaching can be, I'm right down the hall." After Mia left, Hazel stood in her new living room, holding a plate of homemade cookies, feeling something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Connected, acknowledged, seen for who she actually was. It was simultaneously wonderful and terrifying. The next morning, Hazel stood in front of her first official class as an instructor. 25 cadets, including Lily and Jasper, all sitting at rigid attention, their eyes fixed on her with a mixture of respect, fear, and intense curiosity. "Good morning," she began. "Over the next 6 months, I'm going to teach you advanced tactical operations. But before we get into specifics, I want to establish something clearly. I don't care about your physical strength, your shooting scores, or how fast you can run the obstacle course. Those are baseline requirements. What I care about is whether you can think clearly under pressure, make ethical decisions in impossible situations, and maintain your humanity while doing a job that often requires inhumane actions." She paced in front of the room, her hands behind her back. "You're training to become special operators. That means you'll be asked to do things that regular military personnel don't have to do. You'll operate in moral gray areas. You'll make decisions that haunt you. You'll see things that change you fundamentally." The cadets listened with absolute focus. "The question isn't whether you can pull a trigger or kick down a door. The question is whether you can do those things and still maintain the judgment, the character, and the ethical framework that separates legitimate military operations from war crimes." Hazel stopped pacing and faced them directly. "Some of you learned an important lesson this week about assumptions and prejudice. Good, hold on to that lesson, because in the field, assumptions get people killed, both your teammates and innocent civilians. The ability to see clearly, to question your preconceptions, to recognize threats and allies regardless of appearance, those abilities are literally life and death skills." Lily raised her hand. "Commander, can I ask a question?" "Always. Questions are encouraged." "During your deployments, did you ever encounter situations where you had to completely revise your assessment of someone, where the person you thought was an enemy turned out to be an ally, or vice versa?" It was an intelligent question, the kind that showed real understanding. Hazel considered her answer carefully, mindful of classification boundaries. "Yes, multiple times. I once spent 3 hours in a Syrian safe house with someone I had been sent to eliminate, only to discover they were actually a deep cover intelligence asset for our side. If I'd acted on my initial assessment, I would have killed an ally and destroyed an operation that saved hundreds of lives." The room was silent, absorbing that. "Another time, I trusted someone who had all the right credentials, all the right codes, all the right answers. Turned out to be a double agent. That mistake cost 3 operators their lives." Hazel's voice was steady, but the memory still hurt. "So, yes, I've learned, often the hard way, that things are rarely what they seem. And the operators who survive long enough to retire are the ones who understand that." Jasper raised his hand next. "How do you develop that skill, the ability to see past surface appearances? Practice. Constant, deliberate practice." Hazel pulled up a tactical scenario on the screen. "Starting today, every scenario I give you will include elements designed to challenge your assumptions. You'll encounter situations where the obvious answer is wrong, where the person who looks like a threat is actually a victim, where your own preconceptions are your biggest enemy. She smiled slightly. You're all going to fail, repeatedly. That's the point. Better to fail here, learn the lesson, and internalize it before you're dealing with live ammunition and real consequences. The class continued for 3 hours, covering basic tactical theory, but with a heavy emphasis on decision-making frameworks and ethical considerations. By the end, the cadets looked mentally exhausted, a good sign. Combat was as much mental as physical, and operators who couldn't handle cognitive load wouldn't survive. Tomorrow we'll start practical exercises, Hazel announced as the session ended. 0600 hours at the tactical training facility. Come prepared for physical and mental challenges. Dismissed. The cadets filed out, but Lily lingered. Commander, I just wanted to say thank you for everything, for the assessment, for staying to teach us, for showing us what real leadership looks like. You're welcome, cadet, but the real test is whether you internalize these lessons and apply them throughout your career. That's what matters. I will. I promise. Lily hesitated, then added, and for what it's worth, you're the reason I'm going to make it through this program. Seeing how you handled everything, the disrespect, the harassment, the constant pressure to prove yourself, and still maintaining your professionalism and character. That showed me it's possible. After Lily left, Hazel sat alone in the empty classroom, feeling the weight of that responsibility. These young operators were looking to her as an example, a model of what they wanted to become. It was humbling and slightly terrifying, but it was also important, maybe the most important thing she'd done in her entire career. The skills learned in military service translate directly to civilian success, and specialized education programs are helping veterans make that transition. Advanced tactical leadership courses, now available online, teach the same decision-making frameworks used by special operations units. These programs are taught by former military officers and cover crisis management, team leadership, and strategic thinking. Many graduates report significant career advancement within months of completion. The courses qualify for GI Bill benefits and offer flexible scheduling for working professionals, making elite military training accessible to anyone ready to elevate their leadership capabilities. That evening, Hazel received a message on her secure phone. Unknown number, encrypted header. She opened it cautiously. Ghost 7. This is Command. We have a situation developing in Yemen. Asset Ghost 3 is compromised and needs immediate extraction. You're the closest operator with the necessary clearance and relationship to the asset. Mission brief will be transmitted at 2200 hours. Acknowledge receipt. Hazel stared at the message for a long moment. Ghost 3. Daniel. Her old partner from a dozen operations. Someone who'd saved her life more times than she could count. He'd retired 2 years ago, said he was done with the life, wanted to settle down and be normal. Apparently, normal hadn't lasted. She typed a brief acknowledgement, knowing exactly what this meant. Her 6-month teaching assignment was about to be interrupted by one last operational mission. Because Ghost Unit didn't let you go completely, they just gave you longer breaks between deployments. At 2200 hours, the full brief arrived. Daniel had gone back for one last operation. They always said that. And it had gone sideways. Enemy forces had identified him, surrounded his location, and he was pinned down with no clear extraction route. Timeline was 48 hours before his position became completely untenable. Wheels up in 6 hours. Naval Air Station North Island. Briefing package encrypted and incoming. Hazel looked around her new apartment, at the normalcy she'd just started to build. Teaching, stability, recognition. Being exactly who she was without hiding. It had been nice while it lasted. She began packing her operational gear, the stuff she kept ready, because you never really left Ghost Unit, you just waited for the next call. As she worked, her mind shifted into mission mode, already running through extraction scenarios, equipment requirements, support assets. Daniel was compromised. That meant his cover was blown, his network rolled up, and probably multiple hostile forces converging on his location. Standard extraction would be impossible. They'd need something creative, unexpected, the kind of operation that officially never happened. Her specialty. Hazel checked her weapons, her medical kit, her communications gear. Everything was exactly where it should be, maintained and ready. Because part of her had known, even as she unpacked civilian clothes and accepted a teaching position, that the call would come eventually. If this story got your heart racing, you need to check out our next video about a female pilot who saved an entire SEAL team against impossible odds. The link is in the description. But first, let's finish Hazel's story, because there's one more twist you absolutely need to hear. At 0300 hours, Hazel left a message for Admiral Oswald. Sir, operational recall. Will return as soon as possible to resume teaching duties. Thank you for the opportunity. Commander Morrison. She drove to North Island in darkness, her mind calm and focused. This was what she'd trained for, what she'd spent 15 years perfecting. The teaching could wait. Daniel couldn't. The aircraft was a C-17 configured for special operations. Minimal crew, maximum flexibility. The loadmaster handed her the final mission brief as they taxied. Ghost 3's last transmission was 18 hours ago, he shouted over the engine noise. Coordinates in the brief. Enemy force estimate between 50 and 80 hostiles. No friendly forces in the area. You'll be going in alone for initial assessment, with QRF standing by if you need support. Alone, of course. That's what Ghost Unit did. Small teams or solo operators handling situations too sensitive for conventional forces. Hazel strapped in for the flight, reviewing the brief one more time. Daniel's last known position was in a compound in northern Yemen, in territory controlled by a militia group that officially didn't exist. The operation he'd been running, also officially non-existent, had been compromised by an intelligence leak. Now he was trapped, wounded, surrounded, and running out of time. The flight would take 8 hours. Hazel used the time to rest, meditate, and prepare mentally. This was different from training exercises or teaching scenarios. This was real. Lives on the line. No second chances. As the aircraft approached the drop zone, Hazel moved to the rear ramp. Night jump, halo insertion, minimal signature. Just her, the darkness, and 48 hours to pull off a miracle. 2 minutes, the jumpmaster called. Hazel checked her equipment one final time. Weapon systems, communications, medical supplies, everything she needed to extract Daniel or die trying. 1 minute, she moved to the edge of the ramp, feeling the cold air rushing past. Below somewhere in that darkness, Daniel was waiting. Her old partner, the one person in Ghost Unit who'd always had her back, who'd never questioned her abilities, who'd treated her as an equal from day one. 30 seconds. Hazel took a breath, centered herself, and felt the familiar calm settle over her. This was who she was. Not a teacher, not a maintenance worker, not any disguise or cover identity. A Ghost Unit operator, one of the best in the world, and Daniel needed her. Go, go, go! Hazel stepped off the ramp and fell into darkness. Below, somewhere in the chaos of Yemen, a compromised operator was counting down his last hours. Above, the aircraft banked away, disappearing into the night sky. And between them, falling through 30,000 feet of empty air, Commander Hazel Morrison was doing what she'd spent 15 years learning to do. The impossible. She pulled her ripcord at the designated altitude, felt the parachute deploy with a solid jerk, and began steering toward Daniel's last known coordinates. The ground came up fast, rocky terrain, minimal vegetation, hostile forces somewhere close. Hazel landed in a controlled roll, immediately collapsing her chute and stowing it. She activated her communications system, transmitted a brief on-ground signal, and began moving toward the compound. 2 clicks. Hostile territory. 48 hours. But she'd faced worse odds before, and she'd never lost a teammate she went back for. Hazel Morrison disappeared into the darkness, a ghost moving through enemy territory, following the only principle that really mattered in special operations: no one gets left behind. The mission that officially never existed had begun, and somewhere in Coronado, 25 SEAL candidates would wake up tomorrow to discover their new instructor had vanished on a classified operation, leaving them with one final lesson: service doesn't end. The job is never really done, and the operators who survive are the ones who understand that some missions are more important than comfort, recognition, or safety. They're the missions that define who you really are when everything else is stripped away. Commander Hazel Morrison knew exactly who she was, and she was going to bring Daniel home.